week 15 of the fantasy football season. And here's a few tight ends I look to drop this week. The first guy, Foster Moreau of the Las Vegas Raiders. So right now, his value, he really hasn't done much here, is Foster Moreau. And it looks like Darren Waller is possibly coming back this week here in week 15. He said it's a good chance he comes back and suits up in that ball game for the Las Vegas Raiders versus the Patriots. So the last few weeks filling in as a full-time player here for Waller, even though Waller's been out obviously since week 6. Week 10 versus Indianapolis, 3 catches, 43 yards, a touchdown. Week 11 at Denver, 1 catch, 33 yards. Week 12 at Seattle, 3 catches, 33 yards, a touch. Week 13 versus the Chargers, a catch for 32 yards. And week 14 at the Rams, 1 target. So obviously that's not going to get the job done. And now him most likely going to a backup role once again. It's a no-brainer to drop him this week. The next guy, Noah Fant of the Seattle Seahawks. And Noah Fant, he's been up and down this season in his first season in Seattle. But right now in week 14, in a crucial game for most fantasy owners who picked him up in 16% of fantasy leagues and started him, he came up short big time with a goose egg. So the last few games he was all right. Week 10 at Tampa, 3 catches, 34 yards. Week 12 versus Vegas, 3 catches, 34 yards. Week 13 versus the Rams, a big game, 4 catches, 42 yards, a touchdown. And week 14 versus Carolina, in that one, he had the goose egg with only 1 target. So right now, obviously, he didn't get the job done. Week 15, a very tough matchup versus the Niners. I give up the second least amount of fantasy points to tight ends on the season. And right here, tight ends definitely a crapshoot. And anything can happen any week. We saw with Evan Ingram, a couple games, he only had 2 or 3 fantasy points. And then he blows up for over 40 fantasy points. But right now, I don't see Noah Fant doing that. And he's a tight end to drop this week. And the third and final tight end I look to drop this week is a guy who's been on the list many times this season, Mike Gesicki of the Miami Dolphins. And Mike Gesicki, for whatever reason, he's still owned in 40% of fantasy leagues here as Gesicki. He's not really done much. I know last season he was pretty good, and him and Tua had actually pretty good chemistry. But the coaches over here in Miami, they don't really like him as a receiver at the tight end position. He's more of a blocker, and he's a guy over the last few weeks here where his snaps have totally went down. Here's Mike Gesicki. So the last few games here for him, he's been non-existent in fantasy football. Week 9 at Chicago, a catch, 3 yards. Week 10 versus Cleveland, 2 catches, 31 yards. Week 12, 1 target, a goose egg in that one. Week 13 at San Francisco, 1 target, a goose egg again. And week 14 at the Chargers, 2 targets, a goose egg. So that's 3 ball games in a row with no fantasy points here, obviously, for Mike Gesicki. And there's no reason to hold on to him. Even if he has a big game this week here, he's still a guy I wouldn't trust. So he's a tight end I would drop. So that's a few tight ends I look to drop here for week 15 of the fantasy football season.